Arizona. I live in Rhode Island now. I started writing when I was in college, and started out in pre-med. Found out quickly I wasn't any good at it. So I started writing, and I've been writing for about 45, 50 years now. So my first novel was Crazy Heart, which was made into a movie in 2008 with Jeff Bridges, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Robert Duvall, and Colin Farrell. I have my first true Western was Shave Tail in 2008, won the Spur Award. It's the story of a Connecticut boy who runs off and joins the Army, gets sent to the most remote posting in southern Arizona territory, and gets himself into some trouble. My new book is called With Blood in Their Eyes. It's a nonfiction novel based on an incident that actually happened in 1918 in Arizona when 4 lawmen went up to arrest 2 brothers for draft evasion in World War I. They came up to their boy's cabin, and a shootout ensued, and the boy's father was killed, 3 of the lawmen were killed, and the boys took off for Mexico, originally on horseback and then on foot. Ended up walking across the Chiricahua Mountains barefoot in February. Finally made it into Mexico, where they ended up surrendering to the U.S. Army. I grew up in the desert, and in some way I live in Rhode Island now, and I've been there for 25 years, but some part of me never left the West. Some part of me never left the desert. It's the country that I really know. When I fly into Tucson, which I do 3 or 4 times a year, as soon as we're flying over it, my heart starts to pick up, and it's just the country I love. And when I was a kid, I was in love with the stories of cowboys, and then as I became a teenager, I got embarrassed by the whole thing because I knew everything that was important happened in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. Nothing happened in Tucson. And then after I left Tucson, I started to see how much I missed it, how much it was part of me. And I had to go back and start writing about it. The first writer I ever really admired was Henry Gregor Felsen, who wrote books about hot rods. And I loved hot rods. So I read everything I could get my hands on by Henry Gregor Felsen. And in some ways I wanted to be Henry Gregor Felsen. I was going to be the next great hot rod writer. And then as I got older, I started reading John Updike, and then I started reading Hemingway. And when I was in college, I picked up Lolita. And it just absolutely blew me away. It's the greatest thing I had ever read. It's the greatest thing I've still ever read. It's the most wonderful novel, I think, that exists out there. And I was an only child, and my parents worked. I was a latchkey kid. And I just spent a lot of time reading. I read everything I could get my hands on. So I remember when I was in 6th grade, I read all of Don Quixote unabridged, and just, this is great stuff. I've never been a great fan of the traditional Western. I'm not a John Wayne fan. I was never a John Wayne fan. The Western has an odd history. I mean, it started out basically as the dime novel written by hacks who basically understood medieval romances and simply changed costumes and created books of knights errant riding across the desert. I like something that deals with the West the way it really is and the way it really was. I've tried very hard to be an anti-romantic Western writer. I think the subject matter is so rich and so wonderful that to just recreate a medieval romance in spurs and boots is just does it no justice whatsoever. As Americans, we tend to lie about our history, and we believe in these romantic myths, and we need to deal with what actually happened. I grew up just outside of Tucson, and I was about 15 before I ever heard about the Camp Grant massacre. in which a group of Tucson's leading citizens hired the Tantama Odham people to go up and slaughter a bunch of Apaches who had surrendered to the U.S. Army and killed 150, mostly women and children. And nobody ever talked about that. You know, they talked about the ranching life and they talked about Rex Allen a lot. But nobody ever talked about the things that had really happened there. And it's a history we need to look at. It's a history we need to confront. With Blood in Their Eyes is a story about power taking aim at the powerless and trying to take it over. The Power Boys were strugglers. I mean, they were cowboys. They were lumbermen. They were gold miners, finally, doing anything they could to strike it rich. And they weren't much appreciated by the leading lights in society in Graham County, Arizona. And nobody ever knows what actually caused the gunfight. Everybody agrees that draft evasion was a kind of secondary purpose. There was I read an article a while ago called "The Book Will Survive, but the Bookstore Won't," which bothers me a lot because I once owned a bookstore and I ran a bookstore for 5 years, and to see bookstores disappear will be greatly regretted. But it's probably going to happen. I was saying the other day, when was the last time you went into a store to buy a CD? You know, you get them online, you download them. Books are going to go the same way. And there's a certain sadness in that, but there's an inevitability, I think, that we have to accept. You can't fight that. It's going to happen. So. Well, again, the media has changed. I was a college professor for 25 years, and you know, I've watched generations go by. And this generation that's here now loves to watch movies on a 1-inch screen. You know, if you say, you know, do you want to go to the theater? No, I mean, I can just look right here and just watch my movie. But that seems to be changing too. I mean, one of the things that we have to realize is we're in a bad economy right now, and studios are not spending a lot of money, and it's an art form that's driven by money. But things seem there's glimmers on the horizon that things are going to get better, and there are glimmers on the horizon that things are going to get better for Westerns. The Hatfields and McCoys did extraordinarily well. And it's not a Western, but it's got guns and horses. It's close enough to be a Western. So I met Robert Duvall a couple of years ago, and I introduced myself as the author of Shavetail. And he said, "Oh, yeah, that's a good book. Cost way too much to make a movie of it, but it's a good book." And so, you know, but as the market starts to loosen up and people start to see that maybe they can make some money back, Crazy Heart was filmed for almost nothing. It had a budget of a little over $7 million. And the last we saw, it was somewhere around $70 million in receipts. So, you know, there's money to be made out there. And it's going to be a little bit like the music business too, I think, where you see more and more independents coming in and getting a larger and larger share of the market. And I think that's a wonderful thing. A lot of the people that I used to really like when I was a country music journalist sort of disappeared for a while. And suddenly they're all back on, you know, little tiny labels, you know, Watermelon Records and things like that. But they're back and they're making their music, and it's good music and you can find it. And I think the same thing will happen for us too, that you know, you may not get the New York Times bestseller list, but you'll get published. People will read your work. And that's finally what it's all about. The money's nice, but you can't count on the money. You know, Samuel Johnson said, "Nobody but a blockhead writes for anything but money." But he lived in a different kind of market than we live in. And you know, if you write the stuff that you like, the stuff that interests you and fires your imagination, it'll fire somebody else's imagination too. And if you wait long enough, you know, and you hang in there, the money will come. It may not be big money, but the money will come. Yeah. If you have no patience, don't write. I mean, writing is the slowest, most excruciating way to make a living that I can even ever imagine.